So welcome everybody. Tonight we're going to cover a little bit of regional finals feedback, give everybody an update on what you're going to see in those scores that are coming out to you in the next few weeks, and then split 50-50. The rest will be focused on the national finals coming up next year and walking through that informational packet that's been sent out. So I'm going to start off with regional finals feedback and scores, mostly how to interpret and use what you're going to be getting back. I'm going to preface the conversation with we're still compiling all the scores from the judges and all of the feedback that they've submitted. So a lot of these scores won't come out until December 29th-ish after the holiday break for our volunteer team. So it'll be a few days before you see that. You'll probably want to refer back to this video once you get your feedback. But scores wise, as you should be familiar from the competition regulations, this is actually a slide from our judges orientation, but I think it's good to leave in here. There are 5 different judging sets that have reviewed your project entry for the regional finals, that total up to your 865 potential points that you could have earned. Just like the national finals or any other competition, each of these judging sets are completely separate and they judge their specific project element. So for instance, design and engineering only judge your engineering portfolio. Project management, if in the professional class, only judged your project management portfolio. They don't see the other submitted materials. They don't really get to talk to each other. And that's important to keep in mind when you're preparing your materials. If you've talked about something engineering based in your enterprise portfolio or verbal presentation, your engineering judges are only going to see what you give them for that area. So if you get your scores back and you see that, hey, you're low in some area that you talked about, but you talked about it in your verbal presentation, not your portfolio, keep that in mind. The judges only see the element they're given. Keep in mind as well, and this is the biggest thing to preface when you get your scores back, the scores from the judge's perspective, we review everything with a world champion entry in mind. So your regional final score isn't a 20 out of 20 being the national or the regional champion. The regional champion isn't that 20 out of 20. We try and frame when we're reviewing the world champion being a 20 out of 20 in that category. So on average, holistically out of the 1,000 points, your regional finals top scorers, so your 1, 2, and 3s, those are typically between 400 to 500 or 450 to 550 points for a regional finals level. And so that's out of your 1,000 points. And then when you get to nationals, you've improved upon your project elements, and those top finishers at nationals are around 650 to 800 points. Then again, you improve when you go to the world finals. Competition's a lot tougher, so it's a lot harder to get those points again. And that's where your world champions are typically around 875 points. So even at a world finals level, you're not really seeing teams that get 1,000 out of 1,000 points. So as you go back through your feedback and improve your entry for nationals and then potentially even worlds, you should always be kind of growing that point total. So please, please, please don't get discouraged when you get your scores back. And you might see that they're not that many points out of 1,000 points. Keep in mind, the teams that got first place were around 450 points for regionals this year. They're closer to maybe 400. So even if you got 100 points, you're still well on your way to improving your entry for nationals. It's not as much your score out of 1,000 points that matters, but the actual scores that you're getting in the feedback that's kind of going to be an indication of you where to improve. With that being said, you're going to see your scores come back to you in reference to the scorecards that are in the competition regulations. And so you're going to see scores in a low, middle, or high band. When we talk about band, these are like the vertical columns that you're going to see. Keep in mind, even if you score something in the high band, that doesn't mean that you don't have something to improve on. Like I said, you should always be working to improve upon for nationals or worlds. That level's going to increase and go up. Use these bands as an indication of what to focus most on. So let's say, for instance, in marketing and strategy materials for enterprise here, you have something, you're in this kind of band. For sponsorship, you're here. For digital media proficiency, you're in the high band, you've got a 16 or something. When you go forward for nationals, and let's say sustainability, you're in this low band, use that as an indication, not to say, hey, we got a 4, we want to get a 5, or we got a 10, we want to get a 12. That's ultimately the goal, is to grow your points. But it should be that kind of indicator that, hey, you're probably better in digital media proficiency since you've scored higher than you are in sustainability. So if you have a limited number of hours to prepare your nationals entry, you're best off focusing on sustainability since there's more points you can gain there, and you're weaker in that area. You want to improve where you're weak upon. So don't get caught up too much on the numbers as much as what they mean overall. Once you know that band, and you've looked at that scorecard, and that scorecard comes from the back of your competition regulations, we want you to then flip forward to your specific article, and make sure that you've read through all of this in the competition regs, but look at this what will be judged section specifically. So these scorecards correspond with these sections in the competition regulations. So you'll see like marketing and strategy materials. That's going to have all of these well-defined criteria, but in principle, have you included all of these items? And that should work out on the scorecard. But use your judges' comments to understand where they felt you might have been strong, weak, or could improve. Again, that should correlate with the scorecard. One other piece of advice I'll also give is have a lead adult, teacher, parent, somebody you know. It could be like a English teacher at school. Somebody that isn't familiar with your project is also a great asset. Have them review your portfolio and see if it makes sense to them. Each of you has been living very, very close to the project as you've worked with it for the last few months. So it's easy for you to forget the basic things of introducing team members in your enterprise portfolio or your project management portfolio so they know who you are. Giving that material to somebody else to review is kind of like giving it to a judge in a way. They're not familiar with STEM racing, perhaps, but they're also going to be able to point out, hey, you have a misspelling here, or you totally forgot to talk about this, but we know you did it. In that same note, your team has done a lot of great things to get to competition, especially if you were one of the teams that submitted a car. We know you had to have done things to get the car to us. You physically were able to CNC or 3D print to send us a car. But then we look in your engineering portfolio and you might not have talked about CNCing or 3D printing. So good exercise. Get with your team as a team meeting after break or maybe before break, and make a list of all the things your team has done on a topic. And I encourage you to do this as a team because, like I said, you live very close to the project. There might be things that you do as an engineer or sponsorship and marketing manager that seem like no big deal. I'm going to use sponsorship as an example here. So let's say after regionals or right before regionals, you went out and as a sponsorship and marketing manager and you just wrote a thank you note to all of your sponsors and you just dropped it off their businesses. It might have taken you an hour of time, so it didn't really seem like a big thing. It was very quick. And as you sit down with your team in person and you make a list of everything that you've done, that might be, hey, it was an hour, it wasn't that big of a deal compared to some of the other things you had to do. So you don't write it down. And that's where, as teammates, call yourselves out, say, hey, you might have missed that last team meeting because you were doing those things. That was awesome. Why isn't that on your list? Or, design engineer, I hear you talking all the time about the, hours you spend in CAD. Why isn't this on the list? All of those kinds of things you want to make sure you're capturing ultimately in your portfolios and talking about all of it. So get together, have a team meeting. If you want to go old school, bust out some sticky notes, write them on a bunch of sticky notes. And then as a team, sit there and look back at these competition articles and organize them and say, okay, well, all of these are marketing and strategy materials. All of these are engineering, CNC manufacturing topics. These are innovations. And then as you look at your portfolios that you submitted to us for regionals, did you talk about all of those things there? Were they all captured now that we have a pile of sticky notes that coordinates to each of these topics? Were all of those sticky notes talked about in the portfolio itself? If they weren't, how can we incorporate those to the portfolio for nationals? And that right there might be an indication of maybe you had a bunch of sustainability involved in your project, but you just didn't talk about it. And ultimately, the judges can only judge you on what's turned into them. And so that's really important to make sure you're talking about it all there. Some common oversights. If you've come to any info session before, you've probably seen me talk about this, but limiting requirements. You'll find that even if you have the best engineering drawings we've ever seen, or you have the best thing, it's a 20 out of 20 on any day. For instance, I have the scrutineering and judging scorecard here. If you don't have a bill of materials, the highest a judge can ever give you is an 11, because you don't have this limiting requirement that prevents them from putting you in that high band. And some of you will get feedback. The judges have actually called out, hey, you might have been closer to a 10 or 11, but you didn't have this, so the highest I could give you was a 4. And you'll see that in some of the feedback. And we got a lot of questions from judges saying, hey, this is great, this is awesome, can I give them these scores? And ultimately, when we have to distinguish between all of the teams, that we're talking 50 teams that all have great projects, we have to get down to the nitty-gritty and look at these small details to separate you in different bands. So, like I said, if you've come to any info session before, you've seen me use the scrutineering example, and I wanted to take a second and kind of get interactive, and let's go through the project management scorecard for the initiating process together really quick. I've got 10 people online, ask for a little bit of your help here. If I'm a team and I'm putting together my project management portfolio, and I know if your development classes look different to you, but there's similar score bands on your enterprise portfolio. What do I need to have to get from this low band to a slightly higher band? It used to be low, middle, high, but now we have 4. So low and low middle. What do I need to have to get there? Anybody want to tell me in the comments? Everybody likes to ask the question, what's the difference between no or limited and evidence? Or you can see off down here, I cut it off. It says like no, limited, some, clear, comprehensive. What is clear versus comprehensive? What's some? What does that mean? That's a big question, is like, what's the difference? And so that's why I say, what are we looking for when we talk about the difference between these two bands? Okay, limited evidence of the initiation process. I'm not sure what limited means versus evidence. That doesn't help me. But if I read further, goals and deliverables, and then a basic scope statement. So immediately with the initiating process, I can go all the way to the high band for a second here. If I've got the best project charter created, I've got a kickoff meeting, I've got all these things, but I don't understand why the judges scored me a 5. Did you have a scope statement? Did you have goals and deliverables? So when we look at the overall 1,000 points that a team can earn for feedback or for points in the competition, scrutineering is the only score category that you start off with points with. You start off with 100 points, and as you get deductions, you go down to 0. For your portfolios and your verbal presentation and racing, everything else, think of it as starting from 0 and going towards 20. So there's a lot of teams that we felt probably read these top criteria and had elements of that, but didn't cover the basics that are in these lower bands. So go back through, try and highlight and find those minimum requirements, and make sure that as you're preparing each high band entry, because you want to everybody wants to shoot for 20 points. That's the goal, right? Shoot for 20, maybe you get a lower, you don't want to shoot for 10. But shoot for 20, but make sure you have all of these steps in the middle that allow you to get there. Does that make sense? All right. And now I don't want to turn the eraser off. Okay. It's important to note what I'm not saying in that. So of course, we're not only suggesting that you do only what's on the scorecards, but of course, you want to make sure you feature and highlight those things to begin with. So covering those limiting requirements allows you to get to that high band. And then it's the things that set your team apart that might make the difference between a 16 and an 18, or a 15 and a 17. When we're looking at two teams that have a great I'm gonna go back to project management. They both have great kickoff meetings. They both have detailed charter. They both have detailed scope statements. Well, hey, maybe this one has some, meeting minutes or something from their kickoff meeting or, some other elements that the other team doesn't. Those are the ways that we distinctify once you're in those bands. So not saying do just that and that automatically means you're getting a 20, but make sure that you've covered those bases. If you're a returning team, you saw me do this example last year, but so please don't give it away. I'm gonna ask that everybody comments, or you can come off mute. How much do you think a billboard costs in the US? If you were to just take an average number of how much it costs for a billboard. You see them on the highway, you see them driving around town. Any guesses at how much they cost to rent, to put something up for a month? No guesses. Okay, so we got one that's at 10K, one that's 200. So $200, 200K. $30,000, 5,000. All right. I appreciate the participation. All right, so a few of you got close. So we got 10,000, 5,000. Actually, it can vary, obviously, a lot per region. If we're talking about Los Angeles versus North Dakota, they're going to be two different prices. But on average, in the US, it's $20,000 to rent a billboard per month. So, and obviously, as teams that have all made it to regionals, you understand how difficult it can be to raise funds and how much $20,000 is. It's a lot of money. It's not just a quick check. That's a lot of money, right? So a couple of you that said 15 were pretty close. So let's say you work as a team, you've raised a bunch of money, you've raised 20 grand. Okay. If you've raised 20 grand and you've bought a billboard, would you be willing to put an advertisement on only half that billboard? If you've spent all of this money, would you, I guess, say waste 10 grand and leave the other half blank? Would any of you do that if you spent all that money? Okay. Yeah, probably not. Why would you waste space then in your portfolio is the other thing when it comes to feedback. So for the regional finals, there was like between 5 and 7 pages, depending on the category and the competition class that you had. We had some teams that turned in portfolios that were 2 pages long, or some teams that turned in portfolios that, had a few pictures on there. And it was a great start. It's a great start to get feedback. But when you think about your portfolios as a billboard that you put in front of the judges at competition, you only get 7 pages to detail everything you've been working on for months, everything that your team has put in, all this hard work, all this effort, everything you've done. And you've done a lot to get to card, to get sponsors, to get team branding, and then to put it in front of them. We don't want to leave half of it blank. We want to use every bit of that billboard, every bit of that valuable real estate to tell them about the great things you've been doing, or to show them if you've got, you might not want to write a lot of text, so you might show them with some pictures the enterprise elements you've been developing or your logo revisions you've gone through, but make sure you take up and use all that space. Next little section here is some quick bullet points from the judges in each category, gave some general comments that applied across the board to teams. When you get your scores back, you'll get detailed numbers, but also individualized feedback. But in general, things we saw for the verbal presentation, again, like the billboard or your portfolio is a billboard for your enterprise, engineering, and project management judges. Your time is a valuable resource for your project or your verbal presentation. So use your time, aim for around 9:45 to 10. As a reminder, don't go over 10. They will cut you off the national finals, and they did cut you off for the regional finals as well. If you went over your time limit, they didn't review anything past the time limit. So they paused the video right at that marker. So use all the time that you got. Try and add some props or something that liven up the presentation, and remember to be professional even when you're not speaking, so that you don't distract from your teammates. You don't want to be swinging your arms around or looking around the room or doing things distracting that the judges were going to focus more on you instead of your teammate who's speaking. When it comes to engineering, make sure you cover all of those topics that are in the rubric. And then engineering judges, especially like when you match section headings to the scorecards to help them find information. There's a lot in there. If they are looking for your CNC information, they can find a section heading that says CNC. They know to read in that section for it, and that helps them find it a lot quicker. Cheap, quick tests can yield good data. Make sure you have some form of testing. It is by no means a requirement to buy the track, to buy a wind tunnel, to do all of these expensive things. You can get just as good scores with free and cheap, quick methods. From an engineering perspective, it's not necessarily about what you do, it's about the data you get. If there is numbers or something to equate, something to compare, that's what we're looking for and to see how you analyzed that. And then understand the why behind components. There was a lot of talk about aerodynamics in a lot of the portfolios that we saw this time around, but not as much thought about mechanical development. The judges really want to see that you understand what each component is contributing to the car. Obviously, you've designed the front wing. We know how that's going to work with the air, but how are the bearings working in your wheel assembly to help reduce friction? And how did you decide what type of bearing to use or what material? Right. Enterprise. Use your pit display space to focus more on marketing your team. Think of it as like a trade show booth at a big exhibit hall, not just reiterating your portfolio content. Again, you don't just want to copy and paste. And didn't come into as much of play with the pit display plans because they're a lot smaller. So you could just kind of have placeholder text in there, but keep that in mind for nationals. And then enterprise assesses your branding. Here, especially, make sure that you have consistent fonts, color, layouts, documents, etc. So there is a document presentation portion in your engineering and project management scorecards, but typically they'll do a quick assessment of how the documents lay out and what's presented. But your enterprise judges are really going to be looking, hey, you picked this as your team color. Do you have different colors on every page that aren't your team colors? Is it consistent with your branding? How is that exemplified in your portfolio? So you want to make sure you're really on par there. Project management, use that rubric again to guide the development of your portfolio. So as you kind of go in order in the project management process, the scorecard is laid out in that same order. And again, kind of using those headings to help identify to the judges where's your initiating process and where's your different parts there. Refer to the project management guide on background for what terms mean, and then use those same terms. So there's a lot of different ways to refer to different elements and different steps for the project management cycle. But you want to make sure you're using the consistent verbiage that's referred to in the PM guide. Oftentimes the judges will catch on, but if you're able to, any bit that you're able to reduce that complexity where the judges immediately know what you're talking about, it makes it easier for them to find that information and start judging you on it. Introduce your team members and the role they play. So a lot of teams remember to introduce their team in enterprise, but then when it comes to project management, you just assume that we know who you guys are. So when you say, oh, John did this and Leanne did this, we don't know, is John the engineer? Is John the sponsorship manager and he had to jump in because the engineer was sick that day? All of that plays a role. And so make sure you're describing it there. Like I said earlier, your enterprise judges don't see your project management portfolio. Your project management judges don't see your enterprise portfolio and vice versa. So there might be some things that are quote unquote slightly repeated in your different portfolios, but they go to different sets of judges. If you include images, and this kind of goes for all categories, but especially project management, make sure they're large enough to read or include captions about what you're trying to highlight. If you have a full picture of a Gantt chart in there and we can't read anything because it's the size of 2 pixels, that doesn't help communicate anything to the judges. They would rather you zoom in on a small portion of it or show a big section and then show a small little zoomed in, or give us some captions about, hey, you'll see those purple lines, that was engineering, it was way off track on our schedule, whatever. When it comes to scrutineering, specifically your drawings and your renderings, drawings, make sure you have that bill of materials and make sure it kind of makes sense. The table of contents is new for this year for the professional class, so it's specifically laid out what order your pages have to be in and what elements they have to be for. So find that table of contents that's in your competition regulations, make sure you're using that, and then again, make sure you're using the same verbiage as in the competition regulations. So or in technical regulations. So if you're talking about a front wing versus a nose cone versus something else, make sure that you're using that exact term and being consistent with it through everything. And ideally that it matches the table of contents that is laid out in the portfolio or in the regulations. When it comes to fit and finish, obviously we know a lot of teams are just getting started out with the regional finals. Some teams started their car a week before competition. So there's a lot of great effort there, and it was amazing to see the cars got to competition. Make sure as you have more time now and focus on nationals, attention to detail. So how can you improve the paint finish, add those branding and details to make it look more like a Formula One car in a bit, and then smoothing that finish or attempt to finish the car, keeping in mind that you want to finish underneath the car, all of those things, reducing lines. There's a whole info session on manufacturing quality. Renderings, make sure that your images that you include are not pixelated. This will certainly come into play for nationals as well when you have to turn in a printed document. You want to make sure that you're printing at a high enough quality that reflects your render. So oftentimes you'll render super high and then you might take a screenshot of it, or you compress the PDF and then you send that to us and then it reduces the quality and we see all the pixels. So you've done the work, you've done the computation time, you want to make sure that that's communicated across. And make sure your renders match the final car. There was a lot of teams that had some really, really good renders, and you'll probably see scores where you're like, hey, we had trouble calling it not a perfect render or not very close. And we had to get very nitpicky about, well, your cartridge has paint in it, your real car wouldn't have paint in it, and it's really glossy on this, but your real car isn't. So, like I said, we get down to those real small nitty-gritty details as you get closer to that high band, and we have to start distinguishing between the teams. Physical cars. All four wheels not touching. So it's a rule they all must be in contact with the track. I think there's some teams that might see that in a rule like Pinewood Derby or things as a way to get fast, less contact friction, but all wheels must touch the track in stem racing. Screw eyes, make sure to include these. We had a few teams that turned them in without them for regionals. The judges did install them so that they were able to race down the track because we wanted to race as many cars as possible. But for the national finals, we will not be providing these. We will not be providing stickers. So please, please, please make sure you get some of these. They're like $5 from Race to Learn for 20 of them. Make sure they're installed on your car before nationals and that they pass that weight test so that you're able to race. Something we've seen a few different years, front wing is considered of 2 segments. So if you have multiple segments that make up your front wing, only 2 of those are summed. And if you did violate that, there should be a note on it in your spec sheet that you'll get back. And then watch out for proportional penalties. They can be a big hit. We saw several teams that made it through the first 3 sheets of the scorecards totally fine, and then got to that last specification sheet and 1 or 2 small performance, smaller like difference, like few millimeters, but then you have that performance penalty applied and you can lose all your scrutineering points. So in general, the scrutineer said if they could tell you one thing, it's scrutineer your car before you send it in. If you have to go get a $20, I think it's $20, it might be $10 Harbor Freight caliper. It's not the best caliper in the world, but it's at least something. And go through your car before you send it in, before you bring it to nationals, and you'll oftentimes find exactly what we find before we do, and you have time to fix it. It's a lot harder to fix something once you get to competition because you don't have the time and you might not have all your resources you need. Try and fix that at your school. Try and fix that before you get there. And watch out for weight. Just as a fun fact, for every 10 grams that you are overweight, it's approximately 0.1 seconds that you're slower on the track. And that's a statement that's based on a lot of ifs, ands, and asterisks. But in general, the closer you are to those 50 grams, the faster you're going to be on the track. And that's something we've seen consistently just because you're moving less mass. All right. Things to remember. Like I said, judges can only award points for what's in front of them. So whether it's something you featured on your social media but didn't talk about in your portfolio, or you talked about in a portfolio that's not applicable to the judging session, they can only see what they can see. Um, Please don't get discouraged. Like I said, when you see those scores, the points themselves might be low and you might be, shocked out of 1,000, but everybody's starting out and starting from different points. And then, like I said, 400 is like a regional finals first place. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your scores. Please don't get discouraged. There's plenty of time before nationals to fix all of those things and to work on scoring more points. Overall, we saw a lot of good starting points. The judges were super impressed by a lot of what they saw, especially some teams that only got together and did this in a month. I mean, that's crazy impressive. And hopefully now the feedback they're giving, the kind of bands that you see yourself placed into, give you an idea on where to focus and improve for nationals. And I think there was 55 teams that we had compete with the Cayman Islands. 47 of those are eligible to move on to nationals. So if you competed and they saw your entry, they feel that it's something that by the time you get to nationals, you would be competitive with. So keep that in mind. Everybody totally has a shot at nationals. And if there's one thing that, if you haven't been paying attention for the last 30 minutes, that I could leave you with, if there's one thing you take home from this presentation tonight, I talked to the world champions last time I was in Singapore, and I said, hey, if there's one piece of advice you can give everybody, and I guarantee the national champions or anybody that's competed before would say the same thing. One thing, you know nothing else, know your regulations. Know your regulations. It's obvious the teams that have read through and understand what they're preparing. If you've looked at the scorecard and you've added those sections, even if they're not the best on those sections, if you have everything there, you stand a much higher chance of getting all of those points and being successful at competitions. Take an hour, take 2 or 3 hours this holiday break, and maybe make a strong cup of coffee and read through those competition regulations, read through the technical regulations, because that's really going to give you your best foot forward for nationals or any other competition. Last thing on regionals before we touch to nationals, like I mentioned, those scores not going to come out probably earlier than December 29th. They're still being compiled, and we're going to take a break for ourselves as well for the holidays. In order to receive those, all students and lead adults must have filled out the surveys to receive those scores. So those are emailed out to everybody. If you haven't got the email, check with your team manager or your lead adult. Some student emails, it does block our emails from. But look for those surveys, make sure those are filled out. And once the scores are ready, once you've filled everything out, then you'll receive an email copy of your scores and feedback. All right. Any questions on regionals feedback before we move on to nationals? All right, I see none, so we'll move on. If you do have any, just type in the chat. We'll get to them at the end as well. So you've all made it through regionals. Again, we're so incredibly proud of you all and excited in what you've accomplished there, especially some of you did it in as little as a month. And we're excited to welcome all the teams that competed to nationals. So if you received any of our emails, you're eligible for the national finals. I'm going to start with, if you haven't seen this packet, that's going to be your one-stop shop for every bit of information that you should need to know for the national finals. A lot of it we're going to cover tonight here. Most of it's going to be repeated if you already read through this packet. But 9 times out of 10, if you have a question, it's answered in this packet. And if you're looking for something, it's going to all be in here. So this is found on our website. It's in several places, but if you go onto the portal and you go to the national section, it's going to be right there. What's new between regionals and nationals? So the biggest differences, and these are super high level, there's a lot of others, but there's a digital submission deadline that is now the Monday before competition. So for regionals, that was Wednesday, and we had about a week and a half to judge everything, to race the cars and get that back to you for the award ceremony. Everything's going to now be due the Monday before competition, and since competition starts on a Sunday, it's almost going to be a full week before competition. So that has kind of changed. Keep that in mind with your deadlines and as you plan on-site check-in. where you'll turn in your physical elements. So in addition to that digital submission upload, you also have to turn in physical copies of all your project. You'll be presented or pre-scheduled a check-in time that you must report for based off of your team's travel accommodations. So as part of the national finals registration process, eventually we're going to ask you, hey, when's your flight supposed to get here? When's your, if you're driving in, when do you think you'll arrive? And then we schedule all the teams based off their arrival times with a 15-minute check-in slot. And so during those 15 minutes, you come in, you turn in all your project elements. There's an opportunity for questions if you have anything on site. And then you also get presented with all of your welcome packet and information for your interviews at that time. So in addition to what you've submitted for regionals, you're also going to need to submit a 3D printed halo, a fully CNC'd car body if you're CNCing, and there's a full list of everything that's in the competition regulations C2.10. So read through that full list for everything, but a few more elements that are added compared to your regional finals. Also, since it's an in-person regional or in-person finals, we're going to have on-site interviews and racing sessions. So you're going to actively be launching the car to send it down the track as part of your reaction racing sessions. And you're also going to be scheduled interviews that correlate with your portfolios. What's new for the 2026 Nationals compared to last year if you're a returning team? Our after party is moving up a day, so the schedule has been condensed. We got a lot of feedback from teams about wanting to miss less school and wanting to get back early. So we're going to be ending a little bit earlier on Wednesday so that you're in theory hopefully able to travel back to school for Thursday. So that after party is going to get turned into a student mixer that's now going to happen Tuesday night for a chance to get to hang out with your fellow competitors and make some friends. We're trying to coordinate more industry panels and keynote sessions that kind of add to that learning and conference aspect of the competition, putting together some panels where you'll get to talk to engineers or marketing professionals from industry. And then we got a lot of positive feedback. Last year, we did a optional tour where we took the students up to General Motors Motorsports Technical Center in Concord, and we're actually turning that into a full extracurricular day activity this year. It's going to have some networking opportunities for everybody, going to get to talk to your fellow teams, talk to some real life race engineers, and see how motorsports operates in the US. Team registration. So that's going to include when you're signing up for competition, it's including admission for all 3 days for the students and the lead adult, lunch that's going to happen on those 3 main competition days. So Monday, where we're going to go on the tour, Tuesday while you're doing your interviews, and Wednesday before the award ceremony. It's going to include that extracurricular motorsports tour day that we're talking about, and then your after party / student mixer admission. If you are included in your team registration, you don't need to purchase a team guest pass. So we have heard that question before. If you're a student that's on a team and you're registered on a team, you don't need to have a guest pass. Same thing if you're a lead adult registered with the team, you don't need a guest pass. Those guest passes would be if you have support members that are coming along but are not a part of the team, if you have additional interested students that are coming along, parents, additional teachers, those would fall under the guest pass, and then they get access to everything as well, except for the motorsports tour. Due to some limited availability, right now we're only offering it to 1 additional team guest. And then depending on the number of teams that we have registered and the number of extra slots, we might be able to extend that. But right now it's limited to 1 team guest that's able to come on the tour in addition to all of the students that are registered on a team and the lead adult on the team. Hotel booking, so there's more information in the packet that we'll look at in a second. But if you haven't seen it already, the official competition hotel is the Hilton Charlotte Airport Hotel, and the conference center is attached to the hotel itself. So there's no change of venue, the same place you'll be staying at. You just kind of go downstairs and walk through a hallway, and then you're in the competition center. The hotel does have an airport shuttle. So once you tell us what times your flight's at and everything, we pass that information along to the hotel, and they try and schedule their shuttle accordingly to help everyone get from the airport to the hotel. So hopefully it saves a bit of funding there. And then just a note, because we've seen it in the past, the hotel rate changes based off the number of registered adults in the room. So the official advice from the hotels when you're booking is to register 1 student as an adult in the room and then the rest as kids to avoid the occupancy charge. So that's the official advice we've gotten from them. So when you're registering, if you have 4 students in a room, if you book it that way, the price doesn't go up. All the rooms need to be booked through our booking code, and that's done because our rate actually includes breakfast, which isn't typically included in the hotel fee. It's actually a slightly lower fee because we have so many, they've reduced the booking fee. So all of that book underneath our stay so that we know who everybody's staying there with. It also allows us to track teams so that if we see you've registered for competition, but you haven't booked your hotel, we can follow up with you to make sure that you're getting everything booked. In the packet, again, we'll look at this in a second, but the official deadline to book by is March 6th. I will say teams are encouraged to book as soon as they have funding. So the link is live as of now. You can technically go book your rooms right now. There is no cancellation allowed, because keep that in mind, but the $169 rate that we've locked in, that again allows for breakfast for everybody in the room, and has like Wi-Fi and other things that are included. It's only limited to a certain number of rooms that we have, and we think that we have estimated it correctly with the number of teams that we're going to have at nationals. And there is a little bit of flexibility for us to negotiate with them to add more rooms. But unfortunately, if all of those rooms do sell out, the rate does go up slightly. So please book as soon as you know. That gives us more time to go back and negotiate at a lower rate again for everybody else. But we did have some teams that booked last year night of, and at that point the block had already been filled and their rate was about $10 to $20 higher a night, and they still have to stay at the official hotel. So keep that in mind. We encourage you to not wait. If everybody books early, we can go negotiate a lower rate. And so we really appreciate that. All right, what to expect before nationals. So I mentioned team registration, that's live right now, as well as the hotel booking site. You can go do that anytime up until February 6th. Like regionals, registration is 3/2 steps. So your step one, where you submit your team member name or your team name and your members and your lead adult information. And that's also tied to payment, but you can request an invoice and pay it later. And then step two, where you're going to be uploading your team logos and photos as before, and also your event consent form. Guest registration holds the same timeline as well. You can register team guests as late as March 6th. However, there is a late fee if you're registering past February 7th. So what to expect before nationals, we're registering, we're booking our hotel rooms, you're going to book your travel, whether that be a flight or rental car if you're closer. Purchase any materials that you need for competition. I do have a note in here from Race to Learn. Denford has their annual holiday shutdown. That's starting December 23rd. I think they just released that, and they're going to be shut down through December 5th. That won't impact any consumables, so blocks, axles, wheels, any of that is not impacted. But if you are looking at buying a CNC machine or a track or some large equipment that has to be ordered on demand, that will impact those items. So if your team has raised funding to purchase one of those, they recommend that you purchase it before the 23rd, so that really before the 22nd, so that we're able to communicate that order to them. So you go to the top of their list when they get back to work on the 5th to issue. Otherwise, they're expecting about potentially a 6 to 8 week backlog on machines or equipment and getting that out since they supply all internationally. So purchase your materials as soon as you kind of know, but like I said, consumables aren't impacted by that. There's plenty of stock for Race to Learn for that. You'll complete your arrivals and booking survey. So that's where you tell us if you're flying or driving, and that's closer to competition in late March or mid to late March. And then your digital project element submission, where you're submitting your portfolios the Monday before competition. So I know this slide makes it all look really easy. We've summed up 4 months of work into 6 bullet points, 7 bullet points. And there's a lot in between that there too that your team is hard at work working on. But with that, I'm going to step into the packet where we kind of look at all this information again and dive a little bit deeper into those 7 bullet points I just mentioned. And again, it's really easy for me to sum it up in a slide. There's a lot of work that goes on the back end with your team. So this packet is a great resource if you have questions at any point in time leading up to competition to look at. So that So on the team portal, there's a few different places to find it, but the easiest one, if you go to events and you go to the national finals page, this large image, this button, a few other buttons, but really if you click on this one, it's going to bring up that packet of information. Copy was emailed to you all as well. If you go to the STEM Racing main site, it's on there under the dates, registration, and fees. If you can't find it, send us an email. So talked about what to kind of expect between now and competition itself. These are those same dates, just reflected in a different format. There is a informational session in March as well that helps cover some topics, but that's pretty far away. Right now, what's opened is registration and hotel booking. So the preliminary event schedule, and this is a rough schedule as we get closer to the event and the official competition program comes out, once we know how many teams we have, that will have specific times, but this is generally very close to what they'll be. So Sunday, everybody's going to check in and turn in those physical elements. So your cars, your portfolios, and you'll be assigned that check-in time based off when you're arriving. So like I said, if you arrive Saturday, you might have an early check-in time on Sunday. If you're getting in the afternoon on Sunday, you're going to have a check-in time that's later. So we do that based off when you're arriving. The last check-in slot is at 5:45 p.m. So all teams should be on site at the hotel no later than 5 p.m. So no one should be arriving at 7 p.m. after check-in. Everybody needs to be there by 5. And all team elements will have to be submitted by 6 p.m. So that'll be the close. No meals are provided on that day. It's a great day, being Sunday, to go explore some other areas of Charlotte if you get in early, or to practice your verbal presentation at the hotel and get some experience with that. Monday is that extracurricular tour. So first thing in the morning, we'll be loading up on buses and heading out to Concord to see a few of the different facilities out there. And then we'll be returning for the pit display build in that afternoon. 3 p.m. we'll do an opening ceremony pretty quick, safety briefing for the pit display build, and then pit display from 3:30 to 5:30. In the evening will be the critical safety violations fix, which is if when you turn in your car, if there's anything that's ruled as a safety penalty that would prevent your car from racing, unlike the regional finals where the judges might have to try and fix it, or we were unable to race your car, you're given an opportunity to fix those items and get some points back and allow the car to race. So that session takes place Monday night after the pit display build. Lunch as part of your team registration is covered on Monday. And so that's all taken care of. Tuesday will be all of your judging day, so get right into it 8 a.m. in the morning, and your judging times will be scheduled throughout the day, as well as your racing sessions. And then in the evening, we'll do that student mixer after dinner time. Everybody gets to meet each other, so you'll meet each other during the extracurricular tour. There'll be some free time to talk to the other teams, and then you'll get to hang out Tuesday night as well, make some friends, see what the other teams have done with their projects. And lunch is provided that day as well to registered team members, lead adults, and team guests. And then Wednesday, knockout session, feedback, and award ceremony. That's where we're going to try and have some of those panels and everything as well. And the award ceremony is scheduled to be over by 2:30 p.m. You'll tear down your pit display, pick up your cars, and all your competition elements. And then hopefully by 3:30, all of the official competition events be over. So that allows you to stay the night if you want to stay the night and do more in Charlotte, or potentially head back to school to try and get back for Thursday. We had some teams last year that did schedule their flights ahead of the award ceremony. And just so it's noted up front and very transparent, we will not be changing the schedule. We're scheduling right now to end at 3:30. So please don't book your flight for 1:30 and ask us, if we can move things up. To be fair to everybody, it's set at that time. Try and find a flight. We're close to the airport, but you don't want to cut it too close. And like I said, lunch will be provided on that day as well. So this details a little bit about the registration and fees. The registration structure is a little different than last year. So just really quickly, it's $800 per team and then $200 per person. And so if you have a team of four, for instance, there's an example here, it'd be $500 or 5 times 200. So that's your lead adult does count as a person. And then you have 4 team members, so that's 5 people, $200. And then the $800 team fee that helps us cover the pit display booths and all of those associated costs. And that comes out to like 1,800 total for a 4-person team. Have had the question come in, if you're a teacher with multiple teams at your school and you're going to be the only lead adult accompanying them, please reach out to me and I can give you a code that bypasses the lead adult fee if you have multiple teams and you're the only lead adult, so that you don't have to pay this fee multiple times. Your team guest registration, so like I said, your parents, your support members, your other students, if they're not registered on a team, that's a pass that includes access to the event all 4 days. It does not include the extracurricular tour. You can add that on for up to 1 guest per team. And no late signups are going to be permitted with that tour. Like I said, if we have additional space, we might revisit it, but we aren't expecting at this time to be able to open it past 1 person per team. So that's all we've limited it to for now. For registration, it's completed in those 2 steps I mentioned. Here's a direct link that takes you in the team portal to sign up. It's the same way as regionals. When you do sign up, you can go all the way down and you can click here to pay via invoice, and then that'll be generated and sent to you with a payment link so you can submit payment later, get it to your bookkeeper, get it to whomever. You can pay via credit card with that invoice, or you also can mail a check. If you are planning to mail a check, payment has to be received by February 6th. So not postmarked, not you completed step 1 February 6th and then sent it in. So we ask that you please complete registration by January 31st to allow us to give you that invoice with enough time. You're able to get that check and get that mailed into us, since we do have to manually generate the invoices. And then step 2 is that Google form that has everything listed there. So Event City, I suppose I did forget to mention it. We're going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina, if you haven't already seen that. There's some great places to check out. NASCAR Hall of Fame is an awesome one that's pretty close on Sunday if you have some extra time, or Wednesday night / afternoon. Like I said, we're staying at the Hilton Charlotte Airport. This is just some information on the hotel, what every room includes. There are all suites, so there's a little like pull-out couch area in addition to the beds. So there's some area to practice a verbal presentation. Each room, it's got different occupancy on here. Like I said, breakfast is included for up to 4 guests per room, so keep that in mind when you're booking. And this is the direct link to booking the hotel stay. So on this page, and there's more about it in the packet here, but you'll see 2 different book a room links, and these coordinate to the arrival dates. So they're different slightly. Here we have April 12th and April 13th. So depending on if you're coming in Saturday or coming in Sunday, that's just the link they ask you to book. It's kind of different, and I don't know why it's so many steps, but you can, I think, change it here and the rate stays the same. And so just verify before you book that you see STEM Racing USA and you see that 169. And that'll ensure that you're in the group and you get all the other benefits like the breakfast that comes with it. Otherwise, you won't get that and you'll have to pay. So the rest just steps through local airports. Concord Airport doesn't have a lot of flights that fly to it, but there are 1 or 2 airlines that fly from like New York over there. And then our media consent form and event waivers are all in here that need to be signed by the students and their parents. All right, that was a lot of information I threw at you, but again, that packet is online for you to look at any time. One thing that's not in the packet that I want to mention really quick before I get to the end and some questions. Last year we did a Fusion Fundamentals teachers in-service training. And we're going to be bringing that back again this year. So if you're a teacher, if you're an additional like teacher at a school that you want to bring along as well, this is going to be taught on site by an Autodesk certified instructor, and you'll get a certification. You'll be eligible for some credit for your school, and then you'll get some materials that you can actually take back to your classroom. So we had some students ask last year. It's only available for instructors and educators. We'll announce some sign-up details in the new year, but if anyone's interested, it's something to keep in mind. That'll take place in conjunction. It won't take up any of the time away from, I'll say, the big STEM racing thing. So you're not going to miss the award ceremony. You're not going to miss the tour. but it is gonna allow you on the days while the students are doing their interviews to take this class on site. Right. I think I got like 4 frequently asked questions really quick, and then I'll open it to anybody. If you got some questions, you can start typing them in the chat. We get asked every year, can we change our team blank? Members, yes, you can change. At least 50% must be members who competed at regionals to stay the same as your team for nationals. Name, yep, feel free to change your name, branding, etc. You can completely change everything about what your team is, just as long as those members are staying the same, and as long as the school is staying the same, so that you're affiliated with the same account. If you do have issues or questions about that, reach out. But the idea is whatever you submit to us in step 1 is the information we'll now use for nationals. Same thing with step 2. If you have a different social media, if you have different team logo, team picture, we're not going to use any of the material from regionals. We will only use what you submit to us for nationals. So think of it as a different competition essentially. Can I register after February 16th? We will not be accepting any late registrations with the caveat. There's an extension until February 13th where you can register a team, but there's a $250 late penalty. So it's a late registration. It's not going to be the same thing, no extensions. Like I said, your payment has to be in by February 6th. And then all the forms and everything have to be completed by then as well. So otherwise we might impose a late payment if we're not getting those materials in time. If you have questions or concerns, reach out for the deadline. And then after February 6th, can I change member names, logo, etc.? No. We did allow some teams to change stuff, but after regionals, after it was turned in, members or things like that, we're a bit more lenient for regionals because it's virtual. But we have a firm cutoff with February 6th, especially with the number of teams at nationals this year. We're not changing any information after that. So with that being said, if you are undecided on team members, you're not sure if so-and-so is coming or what the situation is, we encourage you to register all team members because you can drop after February 6th, but you cannot add or replace members. If it comes down to it and you have to replace for some reason or something, a late penalty might be applied if we even allow it in the first place. If you come to us the week after or something, we might be able to make an exception. If you're coming to us 2 weeks before the competition, we physically have already at that point printed the materials and we can't replace it. So please keep that in mind. I know it's far out to make decisions in February, but we need that information as soon as possible. And then if you've competed with us before, you might have seen spectator tickets that we did at the national finals where anyone could come in day of, I think it was like $25. I don't know if we'll do the same pricing this year, and see the event. Those are mainly marketed towards interested students and teams that are in the area that want to come see the competition, or if there's a teacher that's affiliated this year but isn't competing and wants to come learn more. So we will have spectator tickets, but this year they will only be for Tuesday. They're not going to get you access to the tour. They're not going to get you access to the award ceremony. You'll only be able to come in and see racing, and they don't include any meals or anything like that. So those will go on sale closer to the competition event. I don't know any information at this time about cost or any of that or capacity, but there will be them just as something that you'll see when people get there. And I know I'm kind of running slightly over time, but one last thing, just on behalf of STEM Racing, thank you guys for your time tonight, but also happy holidays. We hope to see you all at nationals. Like I said, we really hope that all 49 or 47 teams come, and we have a huge event and you get to meet each other because you're all super impressive with what you brought to regionals, and a lot of you, to get started in short timelines, or a lot of teams that have been around for a long time returning. We're excited to see what you come back with. So thank you, for coming to regionals and being here tonight, and happy holidays. Have a good break. So with that, I know I'm 2 minutes over, so if you have to drop, I totally got it. But if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat and we'll answer them now. Other than that, that's all I have for the presentation tonight as well, everybody. So if you have to drop, like I said, this session will be recorded and posted in the team portal. If you want to go back and review any information, or like I mentioned, that info packet you just go to the team portal. You're gonna go to national finals, and then you're gonna click on this image right here. If you scroll down, it's got a link to the informational packet right here, and that should hopefully answer some questions. Regional finals registration is on there if you want to see what the questions are, all of that. Any questions? All right, I think that's it. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop the recording and